Victorian England told children Alice's Wonderland was fantasy. Yet this world hid real dangers. The Mad Hatter was not merely quirky. His tremors came from mercury poisoning. Opium-laced syrups used to soothe babies helped fill graveyards across Britain. Opium. Behind every whimsical character lies a terrifying truth, and unmasking it changes everything you thought you knew about this story. So how deep did the darkness truly go? In the heart of Victorian England, the felt hat industry thrived in towns like Stockport and Luton. Inside these factories, workers handled animal fur treated with a solution known as mercuric nitrate, a process called carroting. The fumes released in poorly ventilated rooms carried more than just the sharp tang of chemicals. They brought invisible harm. Day after day, hatters, mostly men and boys, brushed, dried, and shaped mercury-soaked pelts, inhaling vapors that slowly rewired their bodies and minds. The phrase "mad as a hatter" was already common in Carroll's time, but it had a very real edge. Factory inspectors and local doctors described a pattern of trembling hands that could no longer hold a teacup steady, voices that stuttered or slurred, tempers that flared over nothing, and workers who grew withdrawn or suspicious. Medical reports called this condition eerily. The hatter's shakes, memory lapses, and sudden mood swings were so distinct that British and French physicians began warning of insidious nervous disorders among hatters by the mid-1800s. By then, the connection was undeniable. Chronic exposure to mercury left workers with tremors, personality changes, and in severe cases, hallucinations or confusion. In the world of Alice, the Mad Hatter's erratic speech, pressured logic, and twitchy mannerisms echo these clinical realities. At the tea party, time itself is broken, forever stuck at 6 o'clock, mirroring the sense of being trapped in endless repetitive routines, much like the daily grind of factory labor. The Hatter's inability to follow conversation, his sudden outbursts, and his nervous energy all map onto the medical literature of the era, where hatters were described as both unpredictable and pitiable. Even as Parliament passed the 1833 Factory Act to limit children's hours in textile mills, no such protections shielded the hatters from mercury. In the cramped carroting rooms, the price of every fashionable hat was measured out in invisible damage. The Mad Hatter is not simply a figure of nonsense, but a reflection of real industrial suffering. His quirks and confusion drawn directly from the neurological costs of Victorian progress. In Victorian nurseries, the dangers lurking in bottles were as real as those found in any factory. Laudanum, an opium tincture dissolved in alcohol, stood on countless shelves, sold cheaply and without restriction. Parents used it for everything from teething pain to sleeplessness, and druggists offered a growing market of soothing syrups promising peace and quiet for restless infants. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, a household name by the late 1840s, was advertised as a miracle remedy. By 1868, its makers reported selling 1.5 million bottles each year. These products were not fringe remedies. They were woven into daily life, crossing class boundaries and filling the gap left by absent childcare support. The dangers were, however, well known to coroners and doctors. Inquest records from towns like Lancashire and Birmingham tell of babies who stopped crying, then stopped feeding, and finally stopped breathing. One coroner's jury in the 1860s returned a verdict of death from improper administration of Godfrey's cordial after a factory mother dosed her child to keep it quiet during long shifts. Another case in the Midlands described a baby fed almost entirely on bread and Godfrey's cordial, leading to death from exhaustion, accelerated by the use of Godfrey's cordial. Laudanum was no safer. In northern England, a mother gave her baby laudanum for colic and, misjudging the dose, found the child dead by morning. The coroner's verdict was death from laudanum, incautiously administered. These were not isolated tragedies. Official reports estimated that in some industrial districts, as many as 1 in 5 infant deaths were linked to opiate-soothing medicines. The British Medical Journal summarized a series of inquests where the cause of death was listed as opium, incautiously administered, or exhaustion, the result of opium and want of proper food. Carroll's depiction of the Duchess's baby, screaming, mishandled, and finally transformed into a pig, mirrors this hidden epidemic. The baby's grotesque change is more than nonsense. It echoes a world where infants were routinely silenced and sedated, their needs buried under a haze of chemical quiet. In the shadow of the nursery, the line between care and harm blurred, and the cost was measured in tiny coffins and silent cribs. Bottles lined the shelves of Victorian homes and corner shops, their labels promising relief and transformation. These were not just remedies for pain or nerves. They were part of daily life, as much a fixture as bread or tea. Alcohol-based tonics, opium tinctures, and patent medicines blended into the background, their true ingredients rarely disclosed. Alice's encounters with mysterious potions and cakes, each sip or bite shrinking or stretching her body, mirror this world of casual, often reckless self-medication. The Drink Me bottle, so inviting yet so dangerous, echoes the reality of Victorian patent medicines. Many preparations were laced with alcohol, chloroform, or even cocaine. Advertisements boasted miraculous cures, bitters to invigorate the weak, cordials to settle the nerves, syrups to soothe restless children. Yet behind those promises, doctors and reformers warned of confusion, dizziness, and hallucinations. The British Medical Journal of the 1860s described patients experiencing sudden vertigo, distorted vision, and a sense of shrinking or swelling, symptoms that would not have seemed out of place in Wonderland. For children, the risks were even greater. Dosing instructions were vague, spoons unstandardized, and the line between medicine and poison thin. The Pharmacy Act of 1868 attempted to bring order, but before regulation, a child could easily swallow enough morphine or chloroform to slip into unconsciousness or worse. Alice's anxious self-experimentation, testing doses, and questioning her own identity reflects a broader uncertainty. Who am I if my body can be changed so easily by a bottle on the table? The caterpillar, perched on his mushroom, offers no comfort. Instead, he challenges Alice to explain herself, to measure her own worth, while her body betrays her. In Victorian Britain, the sense of being unmoored, of not knowing what might happen after a single swallow, was both a private and public fear. Wonder's land-size shifting chaos is not just fantasy. It is the logic of a society awash in hidden chemicals, where the boundaries of self could dissolve at any moment. The Wonderland courtroom is chaos, but its absurdity is rooted in the real procedures and punishments of Victorian England. The Queen of Hearts presides with a single-minded obsession. Off with his head. Her courtroom is packed with card soldiers and trembling jurors, all ready to deliver judgment before any evidence is heard. The king invents rules on the spot, and the queen demands sentence first, verdict afterwards. This is not just nonsense. It is a direct echo of the public debates raging outside Lewis Carroll's study. In the 1860s, the British press was filled with reports of executions and the spectacle of sentencing. Crowds gathered for public hangings until 1868, and the drama of the courtroom was a form of entertainment as much as a search for truth. The law claimed to offer due process, but in practice, class and status often decided outcomes before a trial began. Children as young as 7 stood in crowded courts, facing charges for stealing bread or scraps of cloth. Judicial records and parliamentary reports show that these children, mostly from the poorest families, were sentenced to months or even years in prison for petty theft. There was no separate juvenile court, no presumption of mercy. A hungry child could be transported across the world or locked away for years, while wealthier youths were quietly shielded from public shame. The Queen's arbitrary justice, her instant sentences, and the farcical evidence mirror real cases where verdicts arrived before any defense could be mounted. Magistrates lectured starving children about morality, then handed down punishments that shocked even some Victorian observers. The phrase "sentence first, verdict afterwards" was not just a joke. It was a pointed reflection of a system where the outcome often depended more on a child's poverty than on the facts of the case. Newspapers sometimes mocked these proceedings, but behind the satire lay a grim reality. The courtroom was a stage, and the fates of the powerless were decided by the whims of authority. Alice's bewilderment and eventual defiance highlight what so many real children could not do: stand up to a system designed to silence them. Wonderland's trial is not fantasy. It is a mirror held up to a society where justice was often little more than ritualized cruelty. Beneath Wonderland's whimsy, Victorian horrors echo into today's debates on child welfare, toxic industry, and justice. The dangers once hidden in children's tales now resurface in real headlines. The question is no longer what Wonderland meant. It is whether we recognize when fantasy becomes a mirror. What do you see?